So I just watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, not to be confused with The Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. Or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003. Nope, this is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the long-awaited sequel to the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Not the sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003, that was a remake. Or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning, which was a prequel to the remake. This is Texas Chainsaw Massacre from the year 2022. Everything all cleared up? No? Good. So anyway, I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it was the third best Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. But don't be fooled, that doesn't mean it's good. It's just the least bad. Now I'll be honest and say I really didn't expect much from this movie. The Texas Chainsaw franchise hasn't been good since the second one in 1986. Ever since then, the movies have been lame and boring and having no idea what made the original work so well. I wouldn't consider myself a diehard fan of the original 74 film, but I at least understand why it's so beloved. It's raunchy and dirty and paved the way for what would eventually become the subgenre of slasher movies. It's a film that is unapologetic for being dark and crazy and overall unsettling. It is the very definition of lightning in a bottle because every sequel and remake after it could never recapture that raw and disgusting feeling that worked so well. And every single one of these movies not only fails at recapturing that uncomfortable aura, but they also fail at being decent horror movies. The second one is obviously a lot more tongue-in-cheek, so it clearly isn't concerned with being a legit horror film, and it's honestly the only other good Texas Chainsaw movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is boring, Next Generation is a monumental failure at trying to be clever, both the remake and its prequel are worthless outside of a batshit Arlie Ermey performance. Texas Chainsaw 3D is actually one of the worst horror films I've ever seen in my life, and the Leatherface prequel was so bland and uninteresting I literally can't remember anything about it to get that angry over. All of these are terrible movies and even worse continuations of the original film, and so I wasn't really all that excited for the newest one to surprise me in any way. And while I can't say it's the worst soft reboot I've seen, as I said, it is better than most of this franchise, that doesn't mean I found it to be all that good either. From the very first trailer, you could tell this movie was gonna suck hard. For one, it tries to paint Sally, the girl from the first movie, as a badass granny similar to Jamie Lee Curtis in the recent Halloween sequels. For anyone who has seen the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, this makes no sense. Sally had no connection to Leatherface. She was just some girl. There was no rivalry set up between them in the original movie. She escapes, not because of her cleverness or quick wit, but out of pure luck. Also, the original actress who played Sally is dead, so this new woman spewing fake bullshit about Leatherface knowing her and how she's waited 50 years for her revenge means nothing. Also, she dies because Leatherface runs a chainsaw through her abdomen, but she's still alive enough afterwards to shoot him and then hand the gun off to Elsie Fisher's character, even though everyone else who got killed by the chainsaw is instantly dead. I guess this old lady has a stomach of metal. Or maybe the writers were just lazy. Probably the second one. So this movie is essentially about this group of 20-somethings wanting to fix up an old ghost town in rural Texas and have restaurants and food truck stops and art galleries. It's painfully obvious that it's supposed to be making fun of gentrification, but it literally makes no sense. Gentrification is a problem in poor neighborhoods in urban settings because they get refurbished and prices go up and the people who live there can't afford to live there anymore. Again, this happens in cities where everything is much closer to each other. Who wants to set up a hot cultural spot in the middle of fucking nowhere? They even say in the movie that they had to take a 7-hour car ride just to get there, so this would be highly inconvenient for anyone involved. Do you want to throw all your money away? This is not how you start a business, you fucking morons. Then they notice an old lady is still living in one of the buildings, and they say, hey, you're not supposed to be here. But she's like, oh, I have a title to this house. I own this house. And they're like, no you don't, we do. But apparently they don't? It's revealed later on that they never had the proper paperwork to show that they actually don't have access to the house. Which begs the question, why the fuck wouldn't you bring the proper paperwork to a site you are about to turn into your business? They even say they may not have even owned the house at all. But they kick this lady out anyway and she's struggling to breathe, and so Leatherface is living with her and goes with her to the hospital with 2 police officers and one of the girls who showed up to gentrify the neighborhood. She's also about to be married to one of the other characters and it's incredibly obvious that she's going to die. So the old lady dies on the way to the hospital and Leatherface isn't happy, so he tries to give her more oxygen, and one of the officers, for no reason, grabs his hand so he can stop giving the old lady oxygen. This pisses Leatherface off and he performs, admittedly, one of the coolest deaths in the movie. He breaks the officer's arm and stabs him with his own broken bone. It was honestly really cool. In fact, a lot of the gore in this movie is pretty fantastic. The effects are really good and the kills are super fun. I dare even say the kills in this movie are much better than the kills in the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But that's because the original wasn't about the kills. It was about the misery and suffering of the main characters as they endure this psychotic family of cannibals. This doesn't do any of that and instead tries to have themes about gun violence and school shootings. Until it doesn't and just forgets it had those themes to begin with. The main character, played by Elsie Fisher, is a survivor of a school shooting, and the movie shows that she really doesn't like guns and wants nothing to do with them. But then she instantly forgets that she doesn't like guns at the climax when she wields one to fight Leatherface. Also, she can hold one properly and can fire it no problem with no proper training. How convenient and kinda gross and irresponsible. But okay, credit where credit is due, this movie does have one amazing and fantastic scene. Again, one amazing and fantastic scene. So Leatherface chases the two main characters onto a bus full of the investors who came to see the town. When Leatherface walks onto the bus, all the yuppies whip out their phones and one guy says the glorious line, "Try anything and you're cancelled, bro," which leads to Leatherface going sicko mode on everybody. I mean it when I say this scene was fucking great. It's bloody and violent and fucking hopeless. Literally the only time this movie has a sliver of an understanding of the original film. Everyone is getting slaughtered and pressed up against the bus windows, blood is everywhere, and it's goddamn insane. It was a genuinely great scene and made watching through this movie almost worth it. Again, almost. Then it's over and the movie is back to being lame. As I said, Elsie Fisher uses a shotgun for the first time and shoots Leatherface with pretty pinpoint accuracy. Then when that doesn't work, her sister uses a chainsaw and just lightly flicks him in the chin, and I guess that was an attempt to fool us into thinking Leatherface is dead. It's fine though, because he comes back to life for no reason and kills his sister as Elsie Fisher drives off in a self-driving car in a shot that's clearly paying homage to the original movie's ending where Sally gets away. It doesn't work as an homage because, well, again, Sally gets away, whereas Elsie's sister doesn't, so the context is all fucked here. But who cares? The movie is over, and we never have to watch another Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie ever again. Except we probably will, because this movie has an after-credit teaser where Leatherface is walking to the house from the original. And that's it. That's all the after-credit scene is, just a shot of Leatherface walking up to a house. For people who haven't seen the original, this means nothing. And for those who have seen it, this means doubly nothing, because what the fuck am I supposed to think about this? Oh, Leatherface is going home. Cool. Why the fuck was he living at an orphanage then? Anyways, you can tell this movie fucking sucks. The bus scene and the occasional cool kills are what make it slightly better than the average Texas Chainsaw sequel. But, as I said, that's not high praise. In my opinion, Texas Chainsaw doesn't work as a franchise. The original is a work of misery and horror genius. What makes it scary is how little you understand. We didn't need a backstory detailing who this family is and how Leatherface came to be. And we don't need a sequel made years later detailing where those characters are now and how they dealt with the events of the original. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre works in how mysterious a lot of it is, because it's about how cruel and unforgiving the world can be. This movie misses that. Sure, it has a bunch of cool kills in that bus scene, but that's not gonna help it to become a classic down the line. This will be forgotten years from now. Hell, it'll be forgotten by the end of this year. Meanwhile, the original Tobe Hooper movie from 1974 lives on as a horror classic. Do yourself a favor and watch it if you're brave enough. I highly recommend it. But if you want something a lot goofier and is actually a good Texas Chainsaw sequel, watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 from 1986. It's literally the only good sequel. As for this movie, it did try something, and now it's canceled, bro. See, that was my attempt at trying to rework the line from the movie, because it was funny, because this movie's canceled now. Because get it? Leatherface was canceled, bro. This movie sucks!